The ship moved through the darkness of space like a ghost. It was called the Horizon's Edge, and it carried 12 crew members into a part of the galaxy that most humans had forgotten. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Carter stood on the bridge and watched the stars pass by on the large screen in front of him. His hands were behind his back, and his face showed no emotion. But inside, his heart was beating fast. 3 weeks ago, Command had sent them a message. There was a strange signal coming from the outer edge of the Kepler system. This part of space had been empty for 17 years, ever since the war ended. The Vorthian War, they called it. The war that almost destroyed humanity. Daniel remembered the war very well. He had been a young man when it started. He had watched the news reports showing entire colonies burning. He had seen the images of Vorthian ships tearing through human defenses. And he had received a message that told him his father was dead, killed at the Battle of New Helsinki, along with 2 million other humans. The Vorthians were monsters. Everyone knew this. They had attacked without warning, without reason. Their telepathic powers had driven human soldiers insane before the fighting even began. It took everything humanity had to push them back, to win a war that should have been impossible to win. Now the Vorthians lived in their home system, trapped behind automated defense stations that would destroy any ship trying to leave. The galaxy was at peace. Humanity had one dot, so why was there a Vorthian signal coming from dead space? "Sir," said Ensign Lisa Monroe from her station at the navigation console. She was young, barely 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers that moved across her controls like a pianist playing music. "I have found the source of the signal." Daniel turned to look at her. "What is it?" Lisa's face was pale. She looked at her screen, then back at Daniel, then at the screen again. "It is a Vorthian cruiser, sir. Class 7. The ship is completely dead. No power, no movement. It is just floating there." The bridge went silent. A Class 7 cruiser was not a small ship. It was a command vessel, the kind that had led the worst attacks during the war. Daniel had seen images of Class 7 cruisers in his nightmares for years after his father died. "How long has it been there?" Daniel asked. Lisa checked her readings. "Based on the decay of the emergency beacon, approximately 17 years, sir. It has been there since the end of the war. 17 years. This ship had been floating in the darkness for almost 2 decades, sending out its signal to anyone who would listen." Daniel felt a cold feeling spread through his chest. Something was very wrong here. What about the signal itself? He asked. "What is it saying?" Lisa pressed a button and a crackling voice filled the bridge. It was broken and strange, clearly not a human voice, but it was speaking human words. "Truth. Must know. Human. Truth." The message repeated over and over, an endless loop of those 4 words. Chief Engineer Kevin Wright looked up from his station. He was a large man with thick arms and a beard that regulation said was slightly too long. "That is not a distress call," he said. "That is a message. Someone wanted to be found. But who?" asked Dr. Paul Henderson, the ship's medical officer. He was thin and nervous, always worried about something. "The Vorthians do not send messages to humans. They hate us." Daniel stared at the screen, where the shape of the Vorthian cruiser was now visible. It was huge and dark, shaped like a curved blade. Even dead and powerless, it looked dangerous. "Are there any life signs?" Daniel asked. Lisa worked her console for a moment. Her fingers stopped moving. She looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "One," she said. "There is one life sign. Very weak. It is coming from the lower decks, from what looks like a cryo-chamber. One survivor. One Vorthian, frozen in ice for 17 years, waiting for someone to find them. Every rule, every protocol, every order said that Daniel should destroy the ship and go home. The Vorthians were the enemy. They were killers. There was nothing good that could come from waking one up, but the message kept playing. Truth. Must know. Human. Truth. Daniel thought about his father. He thought about all the questions he had never been able to answer. Why did the war start? Why did the Vorthians attack? What were they really fighting for? The official report said the Vorthians were simply evil, that they wanted to destroy humanity for no reason. But Daniel had never believed that. Nothing in the universe happened for no reason. "Sir," said Security Officer Maria Santos. She was standing near the door, her hand resting on the weapon at her hip. She was a strong woman with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death. "I know what you are thinking, and I am telling you, it is a bad idea." "I have not said anything yet," Daniel replied. "You do not need to. I can see it on your face." Maria stepped forward. "That thing down there is a Vorthian. They killed billions of us. Whatever it wants to tell us, it is probably a trap." "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "But maybe not. Someone went through a lot of trouble to send this message. They kept themselves frozen for 17 years, just for the chance that a human ship would come. That is not the action of someone planning a trap. That is the action of someone desperate." Kevin stood up from his station. "Commander, I have to agree with Maria. This is too dangerous. We should report back to command and let them decide." Daniel shook his head. "By the time command makes a decision, that life sign could be gone. Cryo-chambers do not last forever. If we leave now, we might never know what this is about." He looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. They trusted him, even when they disagreed with him. That was the burden of command. "Prepare a boarding party," Daniel said. 4 people. Myself, Kevin, Maria, and Dr. Henderson. We go in, we find the cryo-chamber, and we see what our mysterious friend has to say. If anything looks wrong, we get out and blow the ship to pieces. Understood? No one argued. They knew better. When Daniel Carter made a decision, he did not change his mind. 20 minutes later, Daniel stood in the airlock with his team, checking his equipment one final time. His suit was sealed, his weapon was charged, and his heart was pounding in his chest. On the other side of the airlock door was a ship full of dead aliens and one survivor who wanted to tell humanity the truth about something. Daniel did not know what that truth was, but he knew, deep in his bones, that it would change everything. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The inside of the Vorthian cruiser was darker than anything Daniel had ever seen. The flashlights on their suits cut through the blackness like knives, showing them small pieces of a nightmare. Metal walls curved around them in strange shapes that human minds were not made to understand. The air was so cold that frost covered every surface, sparkling in the light like tiny diamonds. "Oxygen levels are stable," Kevin said, reading his scanner. "The ship still has atmosphere, but I would not recommend taking off your helmet. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero." Daniel nodded and kept walking. The corridor ahead of them was narrow and twisted, forcing them to move in single file. Maria went first with her weapon raised. Daniel followed her, then Kevin, then Dr. Henderson at the back. Their footsteps made no sound on the frozen floor. They had walked for only a few minutes. When they found the first body, it was a Vorthian, lying against the wall like it had tried to crawl somewhere before it died. Its exoskeleton was black and shiny, like the shell of a beetle, but cracked in many places. It had 4 arms, 2 legs, and a head shaped like a triangle, with large compound eyes that still seemed to stare at them even in death. Maria pointed her weapon at it for a moment, then relaxed. "Dead for a long time," she said. "Frozen solid." Dr. Henderson moved closer, his medical scanner humming. "The damage to the exoskeleton is not from weapons fire," he said. "These are claw marks. Something tore this creature apart with its bare hands." Another Vorthian? Kevin asked. It would have to be. Nothing else on this ship could do this kind of damage. Daniel looked down the corridor. In the light of his flashlight, he could see more shapes on the floor. More bodies. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered through the ship like fallen leaves. They killed each other, he said quietly. The entire crew turned on each other and fought until no one was left. Maria shook her head. That does not make sense. Vorthians have a hive mind. They share thoughts with each other. They do not fight among themselves. It is impossible. Impossible or not, the evidence is right in front of us, Daniel replied. He started walking again, stepping carefully over the frozen corpses. Something made them do this, and I want to know what. They moved deeper into the ship. The corridors became more twisted, more alien. The walls were covered with strange symbols that might have been writing or might have been decoration. Daniel did not know and did not care. He only cared about finding the cryo-chamber and the survivor inside. After 30 minutes of walking, Kevin stopped at a junction where several corridors met. According to my scanner, the life sign is about 200 meters ahead and one level down. There should be a lift somewhere nearby. No power means no lift, Maria said. We will have to find stairs or a ladder. They found a shaft in the floor with a ladder built into the wall. Daniel went down first, his flashlight showing him the way. The shaft was deep and narrow, barely wide enough for a human in a suit. He tried not to think about what would happen if the ladder broke, or if something was waiting for him at the bottom dot when he reached the next level. He stepped out into a different kind of space. This was not a corridor. It was a large room, circular in shape, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. The floor was covered with strange markings, lines and circles that had been carved into the metal with great care. What is this place? Dr. Henderson asked as he climbed down from the shaft. Some kind of ritual chamber, Kevin guessed. The Vorthians have religions just like humans do. Maybe this was a temple or a sacred space. Daniel was not listening. He was staring at the center of the room, where a single object stood surrounded by the ritual markings. It was a cryo-chamber, tall and silver, covered with frost. Emergency lights on its surface blinked slowly, showing that it still had power. And inside, barely visible through the ice, was a shape. The survivor. Daniel walked toward it slowly, his boots crossing the carved lines on the floor. Maria followed close behind him, her weapon ready. Kevin and Dr. Henderson stayed back, watching the shadows for any sign of danger. The message is coming from here, Daniel said, looking at a small device attached to the side of the cryo-chamber. It has been broadcasting on a loop for 17 years, waiting for someone to find it. Someone or something, Maria muttered. Commander, I have a very bad feeling about this. We do not know what is inside that chamber. It could be a soldier, a spy, a weapon, anything. I know, Daniel said. But we did not come all this way to turn back now. He reached out and touched the control panel on the side of the cryo-chamber. It was still working, still responding to commands. The screen showed him information in the Vorthian language that he could not read, but the basic controls were simple enough. One button to open the chamber. One button to keep it closed. Daniel looked at the frozen shape inside. It was smaller than the other Vorthians he had seen, barely taller than a human child. Its exoskeleton was covered with scars and marks of age. This was not a young warrior. This was something else entirely. Commander, Dr. Henderson said from behind him, according to my scanner, the life sign is very weak. The cryo-chamber's power supply is almost empty. If we do not wake it up now, it will die within the next few hours. Good, Maria said. Let it die. We can take the chamber back to the ship and study it there. We do not need to wake it up. Daniel shook his head. The message says it has truth to tell us, Dead creatures cannot speak. Neither can traps until they spring, Maria replied. Sir, please, think about what you are doing. This is a Vorthian. The enemy. They do not help humans. They kill humans. Whatever is in that chamber wants something from us, and I promise you, it is not friendship. Daniel turned to look at her. He could see the fear in her eyes, hidden behind the anger. Maria had lost people in the war too. Everyone had. The hatred between humans and Vorthians was not something that could be forgotten or forgiven easily, but hatred was not the same as understanding. And Daniel had spent his whole life wanting to understand. I hear you, he said to Maria. I understand your concerns, but I have to know. If there is even a small chance that this creature can tell us something important, something true, then I have to take that chance. I owe it to everyone who died in the war. I owe it to my father. Maria stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and raised her weapon, pointing it at the cryo-chamber. Fine, but if that thing makes one wrong move, I am putting a hole through it. Fair enough, Daniel said. He turned back to the control panel. His finger hovered over the button that would open the chamber. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. This was the moment. This was the point of no return. He thought about his father, about the stories he used to tell about exploring space and meeting new civilizations. His father had always believed that the universe was full of wonders, that understanding was more powerful than fear. His father had died still believing that, even as Vorthian weapons tore his ship apart. Daniel took a deep breath. He pressed the button. The cryo-chamber hissed like a living thing. Steam poured out from the seams as the ice began to melt. The emergency lights started flashing faster, and a low alarm began to sound. Inside the chamber, the frozen shape began to move. Daniel stepped back, his hand on his weapon. Maria raised her rifle to her shoulder, ready to fire. Kevin and Dr. Henderson moved closer, their scanners working. The door of the chamber swung open. More steam poured out, filling the room with white fog. And then, slowly, carefully, the creature inside began to wake up. It was the beginning of everything. And nothing would ever be the same again. The Vorthian fell out of the cryo-chamber like a newborn falling into the world. Its forearms grabbed at the air, searching for something to hold. Its compound eyes flickered with light, trying to focus on the shapes around it. Its mouth opened and closed, making sounds that might have been words in a language that no human could understand. Maria kept her weapon trained on the creature, her finger tight on the trigger. One wrong move and she would fire. Daniel could see it in her eyes. She wanted to fire. She wanted to end this right now, before it could become something worse. But Daniel raised his hand. Wait, he said. Give it a moment. The Vorthian was shaking. Its entire body trembled as it tried to adjust to being alive again after 17 years of frozen sleep. It was smaller than Daniel had expected, barely reaching his chest in height. Its exoskeleton was not the shiny black that he had seen on the dead warriors in the corridors. It was gray and dull, covered with marks and scratches that spoke of great age. Then the creature did something that surprised everyone. It looked directly at Daniel and spoke in human words. Human, it said. Its voice came from a device embedded in its throat, a translator that turned its alien sounds into something humans could understand. You came. I hoped. I prayed to gods I do not believe in. And you came. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. You were waiting for us? For 17 years, the Vorthian replied. 17 years of darkness and cold and dreams that would not let me rest. I sent my message out into the void and waited for someone to hear it. And now you are here. Why? Daniel demanded. Why would a Vorthian want to talk to humans? Your kind tried to destroy us. The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. It was hard to tell with alien vocal cords. "My kind," it repeated. "Yes, my kind did terrible things. And your kind did terrible things in return. And now both our peoples live in a galaxy filled with ghosts, and no one knows the truth about why." Dr. Henderson stepped forward. His scanner pointed at the alien. "Commander, its vital signs are very weak. Whatever it has to say, it needs to say it soon. This creature is dying." The Vorthian turned its compound eyes toward the doctor. "Dying," it said. "Yes, I have been dying for 17 years. A little longer will not matter. But before I die, I must tell you what I know. I must tell you the truth." Daniel looked at his team. Kevin was watching the alien with a mix of fear and curiosity. Maria still had her weapon raised, but her finger had moved away from the trigger. Even she could see that this creature was not a threat. It could barely stand. "All right," Daniel said. "Tell us, what is this truth you keep talking about?" The Vorthian reached out one of its forearms and pointed at the dead bodies visible through the doorway. "Do you see my crew?" it asked. "Do you see what they did to each other?" "We saw it," Daniel replied. "They killed each other. But Vorthians have a hive mind. You are connected to each other. How is that possible?" "Because the connection was broken," the alien said. "The collective, the leaders of our people, they severed the mind link of everyone on this ship. They cut us off from each other, from ourselves. Without the link, my people become something else. Something broken. They lose their minds and become animals, filled with rage and fear. They tore each other apart within hours." Kevin shook his head. "Why would your own leaders do that to you? What could possibly be worth killing an entire crew?" The Vorthian was silent for a moment. Then it reached into a hidden compartment in its body, a space between its shell and its flesh, and pulled out a small crystal. It was clear and bright, glowing with a soft inner light. "My name is Kethra," the alien said. "I was the High Chronicler of the Vorthian Collective. It was my job to record history, to keep the truth safe for future generations. And I discovered something that the Collective did not want anyone to know." It held up the crystal. "This contains the real records of first contact between our species. Not the records that were shown to my people. Not the records that were shown to your people. The real records. The truth about how the war began." Daniel felt his heart stop. The war. Everyone knew how the war began. The Vorthians had attacked without warning, destroying the colony at Proxima and killing millions of innocent people. It was an act of pure evil, an attempt to wipe out humanity before they could fight back. That was the truth. That was what everyone believed. But looking at this dying alien, holding its glowing crystal, Daniel was not so sure anymore. "What truth?" he asked. "What really happened?" Kethra's compound eyes met his human ones. "The war," it said slowly, "was never meant to be a war at all. It was meant to be a greeting, a meeting between two species who had never seen each other before. And it became a tragedy because neither side could understand the other." Maria lowered her weapon slightly. "What do you mean, a greeting? Your ships attacked us. You killed billions of people. And your ships attacked us," Kethra replied. "And you killed billions of us. Both sides believe that the other started the war. Both sides believe that the other is evil. But neither side knows the truth." The alien pressed a button on the crystal, and suddenly the room was filled with light. Images appeared in the air around them, holographic recordings of events from 17 years ago. Daniel saw Vorthian ships approaching a human colony. He saw the colony's defenses powering up. He saw weapons firing. "This is the Vorthian greeting party," Kethra said, pointing at the alien ships. "They came in peace with no weapons charged, no hostile intentions. They tried to send a message of welcome, of friendship. But they sent it the only way Vorthians know how. Telepathy, Daniel whispered. Yes, a telepathic message of peace and greeting. Beautiful to any mind that could receive it properly. But your species cannot receive telepathy. To your people, to your sensors, our message of peace appeared as something else entirely. Dr. Henderson looked sick. A psychic attack, he said. The first reports from Proxima said that people were experiencing terrible headaches, confusion, fear. We thought it was a weapon. It was not a weapon, Kethra said. It was a song. A welcome song that your people could not hear properly. And when your ships responded with actual weapons, my people did not understand. They thought they were being attacked without reason. They defended themselves. Daniel stared at the images floating in the air. He saw human ships firing on Vorthian vessels. He saw Vorthian ships firing back. He saw the chaos and the confusion and the death that followed. Both sides thought the other attacked first, he said. Both sides were defending themselves against an attack that was not really an attack. Yes, Kethra confirmed. And once the killing began, it could not stop. Pride, fear, grief, revenge. The same poisons that live in both our species. The war grew and grew until it consumed everything. Maria's weapon was pointing at the floor now. Her face was pale. But the war has been over for 17 years, she said. Why would your leaders hide this? Why would they let the hatred continue? Kethra made that strange sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. Because hatred is useful, it said. Hatred keeps people obedient. Hatred keeps them afraid. The leaders of my people discovered the truth years ago, but they chose to bury it. A lie that serves their power is more valuable than a truth that would set everyone free. The alien turned its dying eyes back to Daniel. And I wonder, human commander, if your leaders did the same. Ask yourself why you were really sent here. Was it to find the truth? Or was it to make sure the truth never reached anyone who might listen? Daniel did not answer. He could not answer, because deep in his heart, he already knew what the truth might be, and it was more terrible than anything he had ever imagined. The holographic images faded, leaving the room in darkness once again. Daniel stood very still, trying to process what he had just seen. His whole life, everything he had believed about the war, about the enemy, about his father's death, it was all based on a lie. Not a small lie, but a lie so big that it had shaped the destiny of 2 entire species. Maria was the first to speak. Her voice was rough, like she was fighting to control her emotions. This could be fake, she said. These recordings could be Vorthian propaganda. You could be lying to us. Kethra shook its aged head slowly. I could be, it admitted. I have no way to prove my innocence to you. But ask yourself this, human soldier. Why would I lie? What could I possibly gain? I am dying. My crew is dead. My people have tried to kill me for knowing this truth. I have nothing left except the hope that someone, somewhere, will listen and understand. Kevin stepped forward, his scanner pointed at the crystal. The data structure is authentic, he said quietly. This recording was not made recently. It is 17 years old, at least. And the encryption matches Vorthian military codes from the war era. If this is a fake, it is a very good one. It is not a fake, Kethra said. It is the truth. The terrible, heartbreaking truth that both our peoples have been running from for almost 2 decades. Daniel finally found his voice. My father died in this war, he said. He died at New Helsinki, fighting against your people. He believed he was defending humanity against monsters. Are you telling me he died for nothing? That his death was meaningless? The Vorthian looked at him with something that might have been compassion. It was hard to read emotion in those alien eyes, but Daniel thought he saw understanding there. Your father died fighting for what he believed was right, Kethra said. That is not meaningless. But the war itself, the hatred that drove both sides to destroy each other, that was built on a foundation of misunderstanding and fear. Your father was a victim, just like all the others, human and Vorthian alike. We were all victims of a tragedy that never should have happened. Dr. Henderson was pacing back and forth, his hands shaking. If this is true, he said, then both governments have been lying to their people for 17 years. The human government and the Vorthian collective. They both knew the truth and they both chose to hide it. I cannot speak for your government, Kethra replied. I only know what happened on my side. The leaders of the collective discovered the truth 5 years after the war ended. They found the same recordings that I found, and they chose to destroy them. They chose to continue the lie because it was useful. A hated enemy keeps the people united. A common threat keeps them obedient. The truth would have destroyed everything they had built. But you kept a copy, Daniel said. I was the chronicler. It was my duty to preserve history, even the parts that others wanted to forget. I made this copy in secret and hid it where no one could find it. But somehow, the collective learned what I had done. They sent this ship to the edge of known space, supposedly on a patrol mission. Then they severed our link to the hive mind and left us to die. Maria sat down heavily on a piece of debris. Her weapon hung loose in her hands. They killed their own people to protect a lie, she said. Your own government murdered everyone on this ship just to keep this secret. Yes, Kethra confirmed. And I was the only one who survived, because I was already in the cryo-chamber when they severed the link. The cold preserved my mind, kept me from going insane like the others. And I have been here ever since, waiting for someone to find me, waiting for someone who might listen. Daniel looked at the crystal in the Vorthian's hand. Such a small thing. Such a simple object. But it contained the power to change everything. If this truth got out, if people knew what really happened, the hatred between humans and Vorthians would lose its foundation. There would be no more justification for the containment zones, the automated weapons, the endless cycle of fear and anger. But there was another question that Daniel needed to ask. Why us? He said, why did you want humans to find this truth? Why not send a message to your own people? Kethra made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time. Because I have watched humans, it said. For years, before the war and during it, I studied your species. I watched your history, your stories, your behavior. And I learned something very important about your kind. The alien looked at Daniel with intensity burning in its dying eyes. When humans learn they have been deceived, they do not hide from the truth. They do not bury it. They rage against it. They demand answers. They fight and they struggle, and they tear down the lies no matter how powerful the liars might be. It is the most terrifying and the most beautiful thing about your species. Kevin made a small sound of surprise. You think humans can do what your people cannot? I know you can, Kethra replied. My people have been part of the collective for thousands of years. We do not know how to think for ourselves. We do not know how to question our leaders. But humans, you have spent your entire history questioning everything. Challenging everything. Refusing to accept the way things are just because someone tells you it must be so. The Vorthian held out the crystal toward Daniel. This is why I called to you. This is why I waited 17 years in the cold and the dark. Because humans have something that my people have lost. You have the capacity to hear an uncomfortable truth and then do something about it. You have the courage to change. Daniel looked at the crystal. It glowed softly in the darkness, like a tiny star held in an alien hand. Everything he had ever believed was telling him to refuse it, to destroy it, to pretend this conversation had never happened and go back to the comfortable hatred he had lived with for so long. But he thought about his father again. His father, who had always said that understanding was more important than fear. His father, who had died believing in a lie without ever knowing it. If his father could see him now, what would he want Daniel to do? Slowly, carefully, Daniel reached out and took the crystal from Kethra's hand. It was warm against his fingers, filled with the heat of the truth inside. "What do you expect me to do with this?" he asked. Kethra smiled, or made the Vorthian equivalent of a smile. "That is up to you," it said. "You could destroy it and continue living in the comfortable darkness of lies. You could give it to your leaders and let them bury it like my leaders did. Or you could do what humans do best. You could let the truth out and see what happens." Maria stood up from her seat. Her face was hard, determined. "If we broadcast this, both governments will come after us. Human and Vorthian. We will be enemies to everyone." "Yes," Kethra agreed. "The truth is expensive. It always has been." Daniel looked at his team. He looked at the crystal in his hand. He looked at the dying alien who had waited 17 years for this moment, and he made his choice. "Let's go back to the ship," he said. "We have work to do." They carried Kethra back to the horizon's edge. The Vorthian was too weak to walk on its own, so Kevin and Daniel supported it between them, one on each side. Maria walked ahead, clearing the path through the frozen corridors. Dr. Henderson stayed close, monitoring the alien's vital signs with growing concern. "It does not have much time," the doctor said, as they climbed back through the shaft. "A few hours at most. The cryosleep kept it alive, but the body is shutting down now." "Then, we need to hurry," Daniel replied. When they reached the horizon's edge, Ensign Lisa Monroe was waiting for them at the airlock. Her eyes went wide when she saw the Vorthian, but she did not say anything. She had learned to trust her commander, even when his decisions seemed crazy. "Get us out of here," Daniel ordered. "Maximum speed. And open a channel to command." Lisa hesitated. "Sir, standard protocol requires us to report first and wait for instructions. If we move the ship before getting permission—" "I know what protocol requires," Daniel interrupted. "I also know what the truth requires. Open the channel." They set Kethra down in the medical bay, surrounded by machines that were designed for human bodies, but could at least monitor basic life functions. The alien looked small and fragile on the bed, its gray exoskeleton dull under the bright lights. But its compound eyes were still sharp, still watching everything around it. Daniel stood at the communications console on the bridge, the crystal in his hand. On the screen in front of him, the face of Admiral Catherine Brooks appeared. She was an older woman with silver hair and a face carved from stone. She had commanded the human fleet during the last year of the war. She had given the orders that led to the final victory. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice cold, "I understand you have made contact with a Vorthian survivor. Explain yourself." "Admiral, I have something you need to see." Daniel held up the crystal. "This is a recording of what really happened at first contact. The truth about how the war started." The Admiral's face did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Something that looked like fear. "Commander, whatever that creature has told you is Vorthian propaganda. You need to destroy that recording and return to base immediately." "I have verified the recording," Daniel replied. "The data is authentic." "And I think you already knew that, Admiral." "I think you have known the truth for years." Silence stretched between them. On the screen, Admiral Brooks stared at Daniel with an expression that was impossible to read. Behind her, Daniel could see other officers moving, whispering to each other. "Commander Carter," the Admiral said finally, "you are ordered to destroy that recording and return to Earth. If you refuse, you will be charged with treason. Your career will be over. Your crew will be imprisoned. Do you understand?" Daniel looked at his crew. Lisa was watching him with wide eyes. Kevin stood with his arms crossed, waiting. Maria was holding her weapon, though it was pointed at the floor. Dr. Henderson was in the medical bay with Kethra, but Daniel knew he was listening through the intercom. "I understand," Daniel said, "but I cannot follow that order." "Think carefully about what you are doing," the Admiral warned. "You are throwing away everything. Your future, your freedom, your honor. For what? For an alien lie?" "For the truth," Daniel replied. "I spent 17 years hating the Vorthians for killing my father. I spent 17 years believing that they were monsters who attacked us without reason. And now I learned that it was all based on a misunderstanding. A tragedy that could have been prevented if someone had just stopped to listen." He held up the crystal again. "My father died in that war. So did billions of other people, human and Vorthian. They deserve better than a lie. They deserve to know that their deaths were not about good versus evil. They were about fear and confusion and two species who could not understand each other." Admiral Brooks leaned forward. "Even if what you say is true, releasing this information will cause chaos. People will not know what to believe anymore. The peace we have built will fall apart." "What peace?" Daniel asked. "The Vorthians are trapped in their home system, surrounded by weapons that will destroy them if they try to leave. That is not peace. That is a prison. And the hatred between our species has not ended. It has just been waiting for the next war, the next excuse to start killing again." He took a deep breath. "The only way to end this cycle is to tell the truth. Let people know what really happened. Let them decide for themselves what they want to do with that knowledge. That is what humans do, Admiral. We face the truth, no matter how much it hurts." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You are making a mistake, Commander. But I can see that you will not change your mind. Know that when you are brought to trial, I will not show mercy." "I understand," Daniel said. "But I am not doing this for mercy. I am doing this for something more important." He cut the communication channel and turned to Lisa. "Open a broadcast frequency. Every channel, every network, every satellite that can receive a signal. I want the entire galaxy to hear what I am about to say." Lisa worked her console, her fingers flying across the controls. "Done," she said. "You are live, Commander." Daniel held the crystal up to the scanner and began the broadcast. The recording played out for everyone to see. The Vorthian greeting party. The telepathic message that humans could not understand. The fear and confusion on both sides. The weapons firing, the death, the beginning of a war that never should have happened. And then Daniel spoke. He told the story of Kethra, the chronicler who had kept the truth alive for 17 years. He told the story of a crew that was murdered by their own leaders to protect the lie. He told the story of two species that had destroyed each other because they could not listen. "I do not know what will happen now," Daniel said as the broadcast came to an end. "Maybe nothing will change. Maybe people will refuse to believe the truth. But at least now they have the chance to decide for themselves. And that is something worth fighting for." In the medical bay, Kethra listened to the broadcast with its dying eyes closed. A small smile crossed its alien face. "You did it," it whispered when Daniel came to stand beside its bed. "You actually did it. You told the truth to everyone." "It was your truth," Daniel replied. "You kept it safe for 17 years. All I did was share it." The Vorthian reached out with one of its 4 arms and touched Daniel's hand. "No," it said. "I kept the truth hidden. You set it free. That is the difference. That is what makes humans special." Ketra's compound eyes began to dim. "I have watched many species in my long life. Some are stronger than humans. Some are smarter. Some live longer and build greater things. But none of them have what you have. The courage to change. The ability to look at the way things are and say, no, this is not good enough. We can be better." The alien's voice was fading now, barely a whisper. "That is why I called to you. That is why I waited. Because I knew that if anyone could take this truth and use it to heal our broken galaxy, it would be humans. You are the most dangerous species in existence, and also the most hopeful." Kethra closed its eyes for the last time. The monitors beside the bed showed a flat line. The chronicler was gone, its mission finally complete. Daniel stood beside the body for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Outside the window, stars moved slowly past as the ship flew toward Earth and whatever judgment waited there. He did not know what the future would bring. Maybe he would be imprisoned. Maybe he would be called a hero. Maybe the truth would change nothing at all. But as he walked back to the bridge, Daniel realized that he did not care about any of that. He had done what was right. He had told the truth when lies would have been easier. He had chosen hope over hatred. And that, he thought, was the most human thing he could possibly do. 3 months later, the first Vorthian diplomatic ship crossed into human space. It carried no weapons, only a message of peace. The collective had fallen, torn apart by a population that finally knew the truth. A new government had risen, one that wanted to start again, to build something better from the ashes of the old. Daniel Carter stood on the observation deck of the space station and watched the alien ship approach. Beside him stood Lisa, Kevin, Maria, and Dr. Henderson, his crew, his friends, the people who had stood with him when it mattered most. "Do you think it will work?" Lisa asked. "Peace between humans and Vorthians? After everything that happened?" Daniel thought about Kethra, about the truth that had been buried for so long, about the terrible cost of lies and the even greater cost of silence. "I do not know," he admitted. "But I know that we have a chance now. A real chance to understand each other, to listen instead of fight, to build instead of destroy. And that is more than we had before." He turned to look at his crew, at the hope shining in their eyes. "That is enough for me." And it was.